Hi everyone, Mrs. Wilson here, ready for part 1 of chapter 11, which is titled The Firebolt. So when we left off, Harry had found a secret passageway to get to Hogsmeade and overheard a very interesting conversation that a lot of the professors were having with Cornelius Fudge, and he got a lot of information about Sirius Black and his relationship with his parents. And basically what he overheard was that he was responsible for Voldemort being able to find them. So it was definitely a lot for him to have to absorb and try to navigate through as he sorts everything out in the future. So be interested to see what chapter 11, The Firebolt, brings. And this is how it starts. Harry didn't have a very clear idea of how he had managed to get back into the Honeydew cellar, through the tunnel and into the castle once more. All he knew was that the return trip seemed to take no time at all, and that he hardly noticed what he was doing because his head was still pounding with the conversation he'd just heard. Why had no one ever told him? Dumbledore, Hagrid, Mr. Weasley, Cornelius Fudge? Why hadn't anyone ever mentioned the fact that Harry's parents had died because their best friend had betrayed them? Ron and Hermione watched Harry nervously all through dinner, not daring to talk about what they'd overheard because Percy was sitting close by them. When they went upstairs to the crowded common room, it was to find Fred and George had set off half a dozen dung bombs in a fit of end-of-term high spirits. Harry, who didn't want Fred and George asking whether he'd reached Hogsmeade or not, sneaked quietly up to the empty dormitory and headed straight for his bedside cabinet. He pushed his books aside and quickly found what he was looking for. The leather-bound photo album Hagrid had given him 2 years ago, which was full of wizard pictures of his mother and father. He sat down on his bed, drew the hangings around him, and started turning the pages, searching until he stopped on a picture of his parents' wedding day. There was his father waving up at him, beaming, the untidy black hair Harry had inherited standing up in all directions. There was his mother, alight with happiness, arm in arm with his dad, and there, that must be him, their best man. Harry had never given him a thought before. If he hadn't known it was the same person, he would never have guessed it was Black in this old photograph. His face wasn't sunken and waxy, but handsome, full of laughter. Had he already been working for Voldemort when this picture had been taken? Was he already planning the deaths of the 2 people next to him? Did he realize he was facing 12 years in Azkaban? 12 years that would make him unrecognizable? But the Dementors don't affect him, Harry thought, staring into the handsome, laughing face. He doesn't have to hear my mum screaming if they get too close. Harry slammed the album shut, reached over and stuffed it back into his cabinet, took off his robe and glasses, and got into bed, making sure the hangings were hiding him from view. The dormitory door opened. "Harry?" said Ron's voice uncertainly. But Harry lay still, pretending to be asleep. He heard Ron leave again and rolled over on his back, his eyes wide open. A hatred such as he had never known before was coursing through Harry like poison. He could see Black laughing at him through the darkness, as though somebody had pasted the picture from the album over his eyes. He watched as though somebody was playing him in a piece of film. Sirius Black blasting Peter Pettigrew, who resembled Neville Longbottom, into 1,000 pieces. He could hear, though having no idea what Black's voice might sound like, a low, excited mutter. "It has happened, my lord. The Potters have made me their secret keeper." And then came another voice, laughing shrilly, the same laugh that Harry heard inside his head whenever the Dementors drew near. "Harry, you look terrible." Harry hadn't gotten to sleep until daybreak. He had awoken to find the dormitory deserted, dressed, and gone down the spiral staircase to a common room that was completely empty except for Ron, who was eating a peppermint toad and massaging his stomach, and Hermione, who had spread her homework over 3 tables. "Where is everyone?" said Harry. "Gone. It's the first day of the holidays, remember?" said Ron, watching Harry closely. "It's nearly lunchtime. I was going to come and wake you up in a minute." Harry slumped into a chair next to the fire. Snow was still falling outside the windows. Crookshanks was spread out in front of the fire like a large ginger rug. "You really don't look well, you know," Hermione said, peering anxiously into his face. "I'm fine," said Harry. Harry, listen, said Hermione, exchanging a look with Ron. You must be really upset about what we heard yesterday. But the thing is, you mustn't go do anything stupid. Like what? Said Harry. Like trying to go after Black, said Ron sharply. Harry could tell they had rehearsed this conversation while he'd been asleep. He didn't say anything. You won't, will you, Harry? Said Hermione. Because Black is not worth dying for, said Ron. Harry looked at them. They didn't seem to understand at all. Do you know what I see and hear every time a Dementor gets too near me? Ron and Hermione shook their heads, looking apprehensive. I can hear my mum screaming and pleading with Voldemort. And if you'd heard your mum screaming like that just about to be killed, you wouldn't forget it in a hurry. And if you found out someone who was supposed to be a friend of hers betrayed her and sent Voldemort after her, there's nothing you can do, said Hermione, looking stricken. The Dementors will catch Black and he'll go back to Azkaban and serve him right. You heard what Fudge said. Black isn't affected by Azkaban like normal people are. It's not a punishment for him like it is for others. So what are you saying, said Ron, looking very tense. You want to kill Black or something? Don't be silly, said Hermione in a panicky voice. Harry doesn't want to kill anyone, do you, Harry? Again, Harry didn't answer. He didn't know what he wanted to do. All he knew was that the idea of doing nothing while Black was at liberty was almost more than he could stand. Malfoy knows, he said abruptly. Remember what he'd said to me in Potions? If it was me, I'd hunt him down myself. I'd want revenge. You're going to take Malfoy's advice instead of ours? Said Ron furiously. Listen, you know what Pettigrew's mother got back after Black had finished with him? Dad told me. The Order of Merlin, first class, and Pettigrew's finger in a box. That was the biggest bit of him they could find. Black is a madman, Harry. He's dangerous. Malfoy's dad must have told him, said Harry, ignoring Ron. He was right in Voldemort's inner circle. Say you know who, will you? Interjected Ron angrily. So obviously the Malfoys knew Black was working for Voldemort. And Malfoy'd love to see you blown into a million pieces like Pettigrew. Get a grip. Malfoy's just hoping you'll get yourself killed before he has to play you in Quidditch. Harry, please, said Hermione, her eyes now shining with tears. Please be sensible. Black did a terrible, terrible thing. But don't put yourself in danger. It's what Black wants. Oh, Harry, you'd be playing right into Black's hands if you went looking for him. Your mom and dad wouldn't want you to get hurt, would they? They would never want you to go looking for Black. Well, I'll never know what they would have wanted because thanks to Black, I've never spoken to them, said Harry shortly. There was a silence in which Crookshanks stretched luxuriously, flexing his claws. Ron's pocket quivered. Look, said Ron, obviously casting around for a change of subject. It's the holidays. It's nearly Christmas. Let's go down and see Hagrid. We haven't visited him for ages. No, said Hermione quickly. Harry isn't supposed to leave the castle, Ron. Yeah, let's go, said Harry, sitting up. And I can ask him how come he never mentioned Black when he told me about my parents. Further discussion of Sirius Black plainly wasn't what Ron had in mind. Or we could have a game of chess, he added hastily, or gobstones. Percy left a set. No, let's visit Hagrid, Harry said firmly. So they got their cloaks from their dormitories and set off through the portrait hole. Stand and fight, you yellow-bellied mongrels! Down through the empty castle and out through the oak front doors. They made their way slowly down the lawn, making a shallow trench in the glittery, powdery snow, their socks and the hems of their cloaks soaked and freezing. The forbidden forest looked as though it had been enchanted, each tree smattered with silver, and Hagrid's cabin looked like an iced cake. Ron knocked, but there was no answer. He's not out, is he? Said Hermione, who was shivering under her cloak. Ron had his ear to the door. There's a weird noise, he said. Listen, is that Fang? Harry and Hermione put their ears to the door, too. From inside the cabin came a series of low, throbbing moans. Think we'd better go and get someone? Said Ron nervously. Hagrid, called Harry, thumping the door. Hagrid, are you in there? There was a sound of heavy footsteps. Then the door creaked open. Hagrid stood there with his eyes red and swollen, tears splashing down the front of his leather vest. You've heard, he bellowed, and he flung himself onto Harry's neck. Hagrid, being at least twice the size of a normal man, this was no laughing matter. Harry was about to collapse under Hagrid's weight, was rescued by Ron and Hermione, who each seized Hagrid under an arm and heaved him back into the cabin. Hagrid allowed himself to be steered into a chair and slumped over the table, sobbing uncontrollably. His face glazed with tears that dripped down into his tangled beard. Hagrid, what is it? Said Hermione, aghast. Harry spotted an official-looking letter lying open on the table. What's this, Hagrid? Hagrid's sobs redoubled, but he shoved the letter toward Harry, who picked it up and read aloud. Dear Mr. Hagrid, further to our inquiry into the attack by a hippogriff on a student in your class, we have accepted the assurances of Professor Dumbledore that you bear no responsibility for the regrettable incident. Well, that's okay then, Hagrid, said Ron, clapping Hagrid on the shoulder. But Hagrid continued to sob and waved one of his gigantic hands, inviting Harry to read on. However, we must register our concern about the hippogriff in question. We have decided to uphold the official complaint of Mr. Lucius Malfoy, and this matter will therefore be taken to the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. The hearing will take place on April 20th, and we ask you to present yourself and your hippogriff at the committee's offices in London on that date. In the meantime, the hippogriff should be kept tethered and isolated. Yours in fellowship. There followed a list of the school governors. Okay, said Ron, but you said Buckbeak isn't a bad hippogriff, Hagrid. I'll bet he'll get off. You don't know them gargoyles at the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, choked Hagrid, wiping his eyes on his sleeve. They've got it in for interest in creatures. A sudden sound from the corner of Hagrid's cabin made Harry, Ron, and Hermione whip around. Buckbeak, the hippogriff, was lying in the corner, chomping on something that was oozing blood all over the floor. I couldn't leave him tied up out there in the snow, choked Hagrid, all on his own, at Christmas. Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at one another. They had never seen eye to eye with Hagrid about what he called interesting creatures, and other people called terrifying monsters. On the other hand, there didn't seem to be any particular harm in Buckbeak. In fact, by Hagrid's usual standards, he was positively cute. You'll have to put up a good, strong defense, Hagrid, said Hermione, sitting down and laying a hand on Hagrid's massive forearm. I'm sure you can prove Buckbeak is safe. Won't make no difference, sobbed Hagrid. Them disposal devils, they're all in Lucius Malfoy's pocket, scared of him. And if I lose the case, Buckbeak. Hagrid drew his finger swiftly across his throat, then gave a wail and lurched forward, his face in his arms. What about Dumbledore, Hagrid? Said Harry. He's done more than enough for me already, groaned Hagrid. Got enough on his plate, what with keeping them Dementors out of the castle and Sirius Black lurking around. Ron and Hermione looked quickly at Harry, as though expecting him to start berating Hagrid for not telling him the truth about Black, but Harry couldn't bring himself to do it. Not now that he saw Hagrid so miserable and scared. Listen, Hagrid, he said, you can't give up. Hermione's right. You just need a good defense. You can call us as witnesses. I'm sure I've read about a case of hippogriff baiting, said Hermione thoughtfully, where the hippogriff got off. I'll look it up for you, Hagrid, and see exactly what happened. Hagrid howled still more loudly. Harry and Hermione looked at Ron to help them. Shall I make a cup of tea, said Ron. Harry stared at him. It's what my mom does whenever someone's upset, Ron muttered, shrugging. At last, after many more assurances of help, with a steaming mug of tea in front of him, Hagrid blew his nose on a handkerchief the size of a tablecloth and said, You're right. I can't afford to go to pieces. Got to pull myself together. Fang the boarhound came timidly out from under the table and laid his head on Hagrid's knee. Not been myself lately, said Hagrid, stroking Fang with one hand and mopping his face with the other. Worried about Buckbeak and no one liking me classes. We do like them. lied Hermione at once. Yeah, they're great, said Ron, crossing his fingers under the table. How are the flobber worms? Dead, said Hagrid gloomily. Too much lettuce. Oh no, said Ron, his lip twitching. And them Dementors make me feel ruddy terrible and all, said Hagrid with a sudden shudder. Gotta walk past them every time I want to drink in the Three Broomsticks, like being back in Azkaban. He fell silent, gulping his tea. Harry, Ron, and Hermione watched him breathlessly. They had never heard Hagrid talk about his brief spell in Azkaban before. After a pause, Hermione said timidly, Is it awful in there, Hagrid? You've no idea, said Hagrid quietly. Never been anywhere like it. Thought I was going mad. Keep going over horrible stuff in me mind. The day I got expelled from Hogwarts. Day me dad died. Day I had to let Norbert go. His eyes filled with tears. Norbert was the baby dragon Hagrid had once won in a game of cards. You can really remember who you are after a while. You can't really remember who you are after a while. And you see the point of living, and you can't see the point of living at all. I used to hope I'd just die in me sleep. When they let me out, it was like being born again. Everything came flooding back. It was the best feeling in the world. Mind, the Dementors weren't keen on letting me go. But you were innocent, said Hermione. Hagrid snorted. Think that matters to them? They don't care. As long as they got a couple of hundred humans stuck there with them so they can leech all the happiness out of them, they don't give a darn who's guilty and who's not. Hagrid went quiet for a moment, staring into his tea. Then he said quietly, Thought of just letting Buckbeak go, trying to make him fly away, but had to explain to a hippogriff it's got to go into hiding. And I'm so scared of breaking the law. He looked up at them, tears leaking down his face again. I don't ever want to go back to Azkaban. The trip to Hagrid's, though far from fun, had nevertheless had the effect Ron and Hermione had hoped. Though Harry had by no means forgotten about Black, he couldn't brood constantly on revenge if he wanted to help Hagrid win his case against the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. He, Ron, and Hermione went to the library the next day and returned to the empty common room laden with books that might help prepare a defense for Buckbeak. The three of them sat in front of the roaring fire, slowly turning the pages of dusty volumes about famous cases of marauding beasts, speaking occasionally when they ran across something relevant. Here's something. There was a case in 1722, but the hippogriff was convicted. Ugh, look what they did to it. That's disgusting. Well, this might help. A manticore savaged someone in 1296, and they let the manticore off. Oh, no, that was only because everyone was too scared to go near it. Meanwhile, in the rest of the castle, the usual magnificent Christmas decorations had been put up, despite the fact that hardly any of the students remained to enjoy them. Thick streamers of holly and mistletoe were strung along the corridors, mysterious lights shone from inside every suit of armor, and the great hall was filled with its usual 12 Christmas trees, glittering with golden stars. A powerful and delicious smell of cooking pervaded the corridors, and by Christmas Eve, it had grown so strong that even Scabbers poked his nose out of the shelter of Ron's pocket to sniff hopefully in the air. On Christmas morning, Harry was woken by Ron throwing his pillow at him, which is where we're going to leave off. So we'll have to see what Harry's third Christmas at Hogwarts is like, and also figure out what they're going to do to continue to help Hagrid and hopefully find something that will help them to win his case, and hopefully nothing would happen to the hippogriff. The other thing I'm wondering is the chapter is titled The Firebolt, which we know is a really fast broomstick. So I'm wondering how that comes into play in the second half of the chapter as well. So we shall finish that tomorrow. In the meantime, can't wait to read together, and I shall see you guys soon. Bye.